All right, get up, Jags Nation. Welcome to Jags Cast. My name is Evan. I'm joined here by the intelligent, the charming, the freshly minted professional engineer, Garrett. We're sitting on the eve of another Jacksonville Jaguars football season. How we feeling?
Man, it is tough because every year you get to the same exact spot where the Jags know just the right things to do to build you up, set some expectations, and I'm hoping that this year is the exception in that they don't brutally crush me and break me down. So I think that cautiously optimistic.
I'm gonna interrupt you and I'm gonna say I think that's a foolish outlook. You should be, I think, looking for perhaps expecting a whole new way to squander an exciting season. But until that happens, we're sitting here with our fingers crossed. So, but it is, go ahead.
I was going to say that the thing I think that I'm actually most excited for is that Casey told me today, she's like, that we're actually like only a month out from going and traveling to San Francisco, which is just crazy for me because like my past like 4 months have flown by just with all the studying. And so, like, to come here and it's like, that's only a month out. I mean, it's actually going to be – I think it's going to hit at the perfect time. I don't know. I think it's like, I guess, probably about week 3, week 4, traveling out to San Francisco.
I think that's week 4. Yeah.
Yeah, so that will give us a really good chance to, like, if they absolutely suck, then it's like, sweet. They've already hit midseason form this early on. What a blessing.
That's right, dude, 100%. Yeah, well, the wheels have fallen off by the time we go and see our annual game.
Yeah, that is true. I guess in all the years past, because we have not yet seen a win. I think that the only Jags win I've seen is in Indianapolis. Like a couple years ago, it was the Week 1 game, and that was like electric, man. No Jags fans, that's for sure, but it was like electric. It was us kicking it with Walker Little's mom.
That's right. That's right. Dude. Mrs. Little.
Yeah, it was.
Our regards.
Dude, she was a Houston mom for sure.
Yeah. Do you think? What do you think that like 49ers fans are going to be like? I mean, so for anybody that's like not picking up on this, we're going to the Jacksonville versus San Francisco game in week 4. That's in SF. So we'll be repping it for Duval. But my concern is like how vicious are 49ers fans going to be? Is that like a hostile fan base? I'm not super aware, I guess.
Dude, so like back when I was like living in Missouri and I was like a really big Rams fan, the 49ers were like at the top of like the just reprehensible like fan base to go.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, it's another thing that like at the time the St. Louis Rams did not travel well like in the slightest. But you'd think because like that they had the ties to LA that it would kind of like tether itself a little bit to be like reasonable that people would travel. But they would come out. I mean, they filled the stadium up pretty well. I have like pretty just going to other games in Indianapolis. I have pretty low expectations in terms of like meeting a ton of other Jags fans. I think that it's like getting ourselves situated, like probably just scoping out tailgate kind of stuff, getting ourselves set up, and just seeing if there's any other like poor bastards out there that are kind of in the same like grueling boat that we're about to be in.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
It's the long train ride there and what could be an even longer train ride back is the thing it can be great, it can be awful. It can be however it goes.
Anybody out there listening, please send us your thoughts and prayers. We are preparing to have to fight as many 49ers fans as it takes to get in and out of Levi Stadium in week 4. So
I'm fully prepared to buy a bootleg jersey off of Temu that just easily could be thrown away if it doesn't work out.
Just to escape the stadium.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, that reminds me of It was Purdue's bowl game against Tennessee in Nashville. Must have been 3 years ago now, I guess 3-4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyway, I mean, we were playing against Tennessee, and it was in Nashville, right? So it was like all Tennessee fans, just like an ocean of orange.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you remember that game, but Purdue won on a super controversial call. Like right at it was like I think a Tennessee player was like they were trying to like run it into the end zone on fourth down in overtime, and the ref called the play dead due to like lack of forward progress. And then after he blew the whistle, he actually did make it in, but they said no, turnover on downs,
Yep.
no good. And then Purdue won it with a field goal, and that was like the only time I've ever been like genuinely afraid, like trying to get out of the stadium because people were pissed, man.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think honestly we should I think have like a sort of like a backdoor like escape plan. You know, maybe like a spare like I don't know Brock Purdy jersey underneath the Jags gear just in case we got to make a clean getaway. So.
I think that's like you. That seems pretty fair to me. I mean,
yeah, that's standard. That's par for the course.
Par for the course is probably succinctly put.
Going to an away game, got to come prepared.
But it's like at the same rate, we have a lot of great stuff to be looking forward to. I think that just like the general breath of fresh air that the Jags bring with this new season, I did talk about it's tough being in this spot every single season where you're just like, hey man, this is could be something big. Bless my heart for feeling it again. It's like this really could be, or at the very least, it's like if it's not the year now, we've got stuff to be looking forward to. I think that we have the people now in charge that have that on their radar is like building towards something. And I think that really goes back to a lot of the off-season changes that were made that really, I think, just totally shook up the whole environment that the Jags are currently in.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point. We love to meme on the Jags. It's easy to do. It's almost a defense mechanism at this point, but you're right. There really are a lot of things to be excited about this season. A lot of reasons to think that the Jags are postured to really take a big step in the right direction this year, and a lot of that has to do with, as you mentioned, the changes that we made over the offseason, and I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today. So, for most of those, I guess we could start off with some of the front office stuff, if you just want to jump into it here.
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing that obviously had to happen is a shakeup in management. It was really surprising looking back when you saw the firing of Doug Peterson and then Trent Baalke somehow weasels his way out of it, and you're like, God, dude, it's just like nothing's going to change. They're going to be in the exact same spot that they were. Just fast forward a year. It's just going to be another rinse and repeat. I mean, it's like the thing that's craziest to me is that, like, even with, all of the head coaches, I mean, I know that Trevor's only been on a couple, 3, I mean, I guess if you include interim. But it's like the common denominator was also Trent Baalke. That all of these years of woes, with the exception of the playoff run, is that Trent Baalke was there. So when he was let go, that was when it was like, okay, now we're serious. And then when they get Liam Cohen to come in, and then they start looking for a GM to pair with that, I love the whole like just paradigm shift that they've taken, where it's like, hey, they tried, these established guys. They tried, Doug Peterson. He won a Super Bowl. He is an established guy within the NFL, head coaching experience. And you take that pivot to two new guys, or, two new guys relative to their position, that are able to go and make a leap, and I think that really bring a fresh perspective. And more than anything, like I said, just a whole different attitude in the building. And I also think that, bringing in Tony Baselli to like
Yes.
really give that lens of football to it all. I think that
Yeah.
those gives a lot to be excited about, because at the very least you can confidently say it will be different than it's been, in previous seasons.
Absolutely. And that last name that you brought up there, Tony Baselli being hired in as the executive vice president of football operations in Jacksonville, that's kind of where I actually want to start, because I think as an organization, that one has the potential to have like the longest term, you know, paradigm shift within the building.
For sure.
You can say a lot of good things, I think, about the Khan family and their willingness to spend on the team and their commitment to keeping the team in Jacksonville. One thing you really can't give them credit for is knowing the NFL and like
Sure.
knowing the ins and outs of roster construction, putting together a team, putting together a front office staff. That's just something that it's very obvious that it's never really clicked. At least,
Yeah.
at least not with Shad. Maybe with Tony. I don't know. I know less about Tony than I do Shad, um, but yeah. So I think Tony Baselli coming in, I feel like there's going to be a serious culture shift in terms of what kind of individuals are we bringing into the front office. You know what I mean? As somebody that has been a part of some very successful teams and understands, football culture, like really looking into the character and the drive of the individuals, and not just like accolades. You know what I mean? That was the thing with Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning head coach, right? But I feel like, I don't know. It seemed like after, midway through the, 2023 season, Doug Peterson felt like he was checked out to me. He was just there to collect a check. I mean, who knows what's really going on inside the guy's head, but like the way he would respond to the media, the sort of lack of
It was like a
creativity,
polar opposite to when they
Yeah.
were winning. It's like it's almost a how you respond when you're down kind of deal. And I felt like it was like responding in one of like the poorest ways. It
100%.
it wasn't taking ownership, and I can't really blame him. Writing was kind of on the wall. I mean, that's when you kind of really started moving in the direction of like, hey man, I'm kind of fighting for my position. You don't want to
Yeah.
just say like, hey, I'm actually I'm the problem. But
Right.
to the same degree, it's like it seems from a knee-jerk reaction that at least like Liam Cohen and James Gladstone, they seem to be accountable individuals. That
Oh, for sure. Well, and
they
motivated,
wanted.
I think.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like somebody who wants to come in there and say, hey, everything that's going on, that is nobody else but me. I'm doing that. That's me. And I think that it starts at the top, just like you said. I think that Tony Baselli is able to kind of see through maybe the things that can be said to elevate you to a role that maybe is not the best for the team. And you kind of just have to, at some point, really have faith that it's like Tony is able to really weigh in with the Khan family to say, hey, look, these are the people that we should have in charge. And I mean, ultimately, I feel better having him a part of those decisions. I think that
Absolutely.
anybody does.
Yeah, well, and you can't question his love and loyalty for the organization. I think that's the thing that stands out to me is it feels like any decisions that come across Tony Baselli's desk, I have confidence that he's viewing it through the lens of, hey, this is what's best for the organization, best for the team. None of the politics, none of the BS. Anyway, you did mention a couple of times Liam Cohen. So as we are aware, as soon as Trent Baalke got the axe, very quickly in a somewhat dramatic fashion, we bring on Liam Cohen to be the head coach. And I'm curious, man, what are your thoughts there? How'd we do?
I knew that it was going to be winter when immediately I saw Tony Khan roll out, open up the window as Juliet does in our Romeo. He stows away. He just can't help himself. He sneaks off from the Bucks organization, and he comes in. He does what's right for him. I mean, I do joke about it, but it's like, ultimately he was put in a tough position from how he
True.
segued from the Buccaneers, where they basically gave him this, like, not really an ultimatum, but I mean they really put him in this difficult position where it's like, we promise that we'll give you all this pay, but you can't interview anywhere else. When, like, clearly that was what his next step was. It's a
Definitely.
really, like, a tough sentence to receive when you found such great success in a system where, hey, Baker Mayfield, that was not a guy who was going to be like a really big guy after bouncing around between Carolina and the Rams, and going and finding diamonds in the rough like Bucky Irving, and going and formulating what was really already a pretty decent team and elevating it. And a lot of that offensive play calling that he was able to shake up, I mean, that's something that you have to be first and foremost excited for, is that,
Oh, for sure.
Doug Peterson could have been running a playbook that was written 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Or longer.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. So it's like, ultimately, having any sort of versatility in the play calling, realizing, hey, this, triple toss, play is just not going to work. I mean, it's like, I'm not asking for him to, like, reinvent football. I'm just asking for him to move the football down the field, and that's a guy that gives me confidence that he'll do it. I think that he really elevated a lot of the players that were on that Buccaneers offense, and I think that he deservedly got a head coach position as a result.
Yeah, I do, and I do want to talk about that, like the sort of drama surrounding his hire there. And I'll start off with this for any Buccaneers fans out there. I think if I were a Buccaneers fan, I'd be pissed. Okay, I get it. He's clearly, like, he was one of the top names, top offensive coordinator names going into this offseason. You felt like you really had a stud, and you did. He's by all accounts, a brilliant offensive mind. But what you said, Garrett, is totally true. I mean, he was in a rock and a hard place with that deal. Your boss comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to give you a raise, but you're not allowed to, on the condition that you're not interviewing anywhere else. What are you going to tell him? No, I think I'd like to interview other places. Thanks.
Yeah.
You can't say that. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to be like, yeah, thanks.
I mean,
how gracious of you. I'm so honored to.
Dude, everybody who was, like, calling for Liam Cohen's head acts like they've never worked a single day in their life. Like, that at the end of the day,
it sounds like.
Yeah. Bro, raw hours put on Reddit. But it's just like, ultimately, you got to do what's best for your career. You got to do what's ultimately best for your family.
Yeah.
And that was taking an opportunity.
That's right.
And doing it. And I think that the situation that he's put in forced him to perhaps play it out as he did. You know what
Absolutely. I mean? So we can go, let's go on the record here. We can't have our cake and eat it too. If we find out that we have, the next great coordinator, whether that's Greg Udinsky, who we'll talk about, or Anthony Campanile, if they get sniped out from under us because they've done so well in their coordinator position, we've got no choice but to say, hey, good for them. We got to do what's best for their career. So that's us going out on a limb here. But yeah, I think the other thing that I wanted to bring up about Liam Cohen, you and I had been discussing potential head coaching hires before they ever happened. And the two biggest names going into this offseason were Ben Johnson, obviously, and Liam Cohen. And I don't know if you remember this, but before anything happened, before Ben Johnson got hired by the Bears, potentially even before Doug Peterson got let go, I believe I told you that Liam Cohen, I think, was actually my preferred pick over Ben Johnson. For the reason that, Ben Johnson, obviously had all these brilliant, like never before seen plays up in Detroit. But it's like, he was working with like a Lamborghini offense,
True.
One of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Probably the best running back room in the NFL, great receivers, great tight end, serviceable quarterback.
I know that's not how you actually feel. I know. Bro, don't make me pull up the receipts. Calling for Jared Goff to have a better fantasy football season than Josh Allen. I have the dates, man. I have the receipts.
I've been known to be a bit of a Jared Goff guy. I'm a Goff guy, but either way, point still stands. It was cool to see everything that Ben Johnson was able to do. But if we're being realistic, we don't have nearly the talent on the offensive side of the ball. At least, at the time. Probably still, but definitely at the time.
Yeah.
We don't have anywhere close to the offensive line as the Lions do. Receiving talent, maybe we're getting there. Running back talent almost certainly is not there.
Right.
There's we're not working with the same equipment that they are in Detroit. And that was the thing to me where it's like I felt a little bit better about Liam Cohen because now they had great weapons in Tampa. But it's not like you looked at that Tampa Bay offensive roster and you're just seeing stud, just like across the board, just like great players, I think that from a talent perspective, we're much closer to Tampa than we are to Detroit.
Oh, 100%.
So for that reason, I was, Liam Cohen was always my number one pick just because I thought, hey, we've seen him do it. We've seen him have a fantastic offense.
Yep.
That punched above its weight in terms of, who they have on the roster, in my opinion. So.
Well, and I hate to even bring it up, but obviously Ben Johnson couldn't say Duval half as spicy as what our boy Liam Cohen could. I don't even want to say it because honestly, I just know I'm going to put him to shame. I'm going to let him down. It's just not. Yeah. It's not right of me to do.
The bar is set pretty high.
Absolutely, and naturally, hey, sometimes people rise to the positions because they obviously just deserve it, and that right there, I knew immediately.
Dude, it almost felt to me like Liam Cohen's first Duval that he gave in that press conference was like, it came from his soul. It was like a true. You really got to peer into this guy's psyche,
bro.
And you just see this like happy, joyful guy that's ready to come and win some football games. You know what I'm saying? He's not here for the fluff. He's not here for the PR, man. This man's here to score touchdowns.
An artist of sorts.
That's right. A savant, maybe.
A savant.
Yeah.
The modern Renaissance man. But again, he brought in a lot with it. And James Gladstone, moving in beside that, you have only seen him be a very articulate. I think that's something that I guess maybe I never really appreciated as much as when you go from Trent Baalke to someone like James Gladstone, that it's just like he is very well versed in terms of saying what he wants to foster. And I think that his pedigree speaks for itself. I think that he got a lot of great tutelage while being out in LA, and I think that building upon that, there's a lot of things to be excited for. And I think that you've seen that in a lot of their off-season moves, including, who that they're getting in with, the coordinators. And so I don't know if you want to speak at all to that, but...
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple things about James Gladstone, too, because that's another one of those moves. Like we just said, to start everything off, the biggest plague on this organization over the last several years has been the general manager. I think most people that have been keeping up with the Jaguars, I think, would be in pretty unanimous agreement about that. Trent Baalke, the effect that he had in that building, felt like, if you had to pick one thing that was the most impactful, it was probably his position and his impact. That being said, James Gladstone is walking into that very same role with that same ability to impact the franchise in such a major way. And I have to say this, if this whole NFL GM thing doesn't work out for James Gladstone, he should go into sales. Because like you said, dude, he says something and it makes you believe. He's such a talented speaker. The way that he is able to paint these pictures in your mind of exactly what his vision is. I mean, we'll see, how that vision pans out. We have to give it a few years, but
I like what I've seen so far. You are right though. It's almost like it's so good you pray that he's not like a snake oil salesman, where it's like
no, that's exactly
he's just that good at resonating that he's able to talk the talk. But I mean, at the same rate, the guy's been around football his entire life. It's clear that that's part of a passion. I think he's maybe a little bit of a cornball when you sit in and you actually are watching his pressers, or he goes on a podcast or whatever and he really talks about his life. But it's because it's like he's clearly in love with the game. Mm-hmm. And passion can take you a long way. I won't make any mistake to say that it's the whole thing. But rallying a group of individuals for a common goal, that's leadership. And being able to say that vision and get other people to believe it, I mean, that's leadership. And again, I think his pedigree speaks for itself. I think that the draft picks will come. I think that he's positioned himself well. Maybe I would have liked them to spend a little bit more in the offseason, but I would say that they're positioned to do a lot of different things next season. And so that's where I kind of see him as having a vision that it's, hey, every year is a stepping stone. I think it might be a little bit foolish to say, hey, the Jags have a Super Bowl roster. That would maybe not foolish, but a little bit over enthusiastic, perhaps.
Certainly.
And I think that coming in as a new head coach, new GM, you realize that that's the position that you're in. You obviously are not inheriting a Super Bowl ready team.
You didn't get hired because the last guy was too good at his job.
Yeah, right. God, Trent Baalke, we just needed him on every team in the NFL. So it's like you obviously have a lot of steps that you have to make under what can be a short time frame if you're not producing quickly. Yet it seems that he realizes the immediate things that they need to plug into and really start focusing on the team, really to support the pieces that they already had, especially being Trevor Lawrence. I think that he made a lot of moves to really help shore up the line. It's tough to tell where that comes from, if it's more of a Liam Cohen or more of a James Gladstone. But again, they're a unit, so you could kind of talk to any of them as talking about, hey, they're obviously trying to focus around their pieces that are for the franchise, right? Mm. And I think that he's done a great job.
Yeah, one last thing to say about James Gladstone before we move on to some of the coaching staff hires. Just the way that he presents himself and kind of the and we'll get into this when we talk about the draft picks, but the boldness with which he's kind of handled his very first offseason as the Jaguars GM, I think that he's going to be remembered either as being a really fantastic GM or one that is very, very, very awful. Just with how much he stands out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just such a character at the job. Anyway, some of the other changes, we need to talk about would be some of the coaching staff pieces brought in with Liam Cohen. mainly the new offensive and defensive coordinator roles. So that brings us to our first piece of fan mail that we got to read here on the show.
Our long-standing fans, right?
That's right, exactly.
Feverishly.
We do. We appreciate the fans. We always are eager to get some mail and see if we can answer your questions live on the air. So let's see here. We've got this first one. This is from Pug Dieterson. Okay. Pug Dieterson writes, is there a more obvious downgrade at the offensive coordinator position in the entire NFL? Grant Udinski is nowhere near as handsome as Press Taylor, and rumor has it he's not as good in the sack either. Cordially yours, Pug Dieterson. Garrett, you wanna take this one?
Pug, I don't know where you hail from. You sound like you have been very well connected with what's going on in a lot of recent NFL moving parts. But this is one that I just have to I have to downright say that it's just it you're wrong here. I think that if we were able to pull up the side-by-side of Press Taylor and Grant Udinski, you would see that this is a pale comparison of where we used to be. I think that, in fact, you may be surprised that you couldn't really go much lower than Press Taylor. And that was, I mean, honestly, half of the nail in the coffin for Doug Peterson.
That's true, man. And I just want to say one thing. I don't know where you heard that Grant Udinski's not as good in the sack as Press Taylor. You clearly have not seen his playbook.
Bruh.
Clearly.
They have a whole, I don't know if you've seen it, but they have a whole subreddit for Grant Udinski's love life. And, I mean, it's one of those ones that you go at any point in the day, and it's, at least hundreds of people are active
Quality
on the
content.
channel. Yeah, it's just one of those ones where sometimes the proof's in the pudding. You have that many people that are saying one thing. Press Taylor.
Numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. You got to say. True. Well, I don't have a lot to say about Grant Udinski other than, I'm not super familiar with like his whole football philosophy, but I will say it's nice to get a piece of that Kevin O'Connell, coaching tree from that Minnesota offense last year. I think that's a good sign. You could see some parallels there between like that alpha receiver, comparing Justin Jefferson and BTJ. I don't know. I think there's some goodness to be had coming from that, that system. But I don't know too much about the guy. I know he's super young. He's 29 and he's an offensive coordinator, so that's a little worrisome, I guess. It makes you wonder, like, does this guy really have the breadth of experience to command a side of the ball? I mean, it helps that Liam Cohen is like an offensive guy, so like you think that he'll be probably deferring, some maybe a lot of stuff to the head coach. But I don't know. I really didn't know a whole lot about Grant Udinski before the hire was made.
Yeah. And I mean, I would agree that they've put a lot of eggs into kind of the youth basket, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
They're clearly trying to make a total turn from previous years.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, being consistent with that with Grant Udinski, I have no problem with that. Again, this is not a thing where you and I are, truth incarnate, that we are knowers of ball to the nth degree.
We're not X's and O's guys.
Right, yeah, but I mean, at some level, it's like, it's okay to be along for the ride and say, hey, obviously, these guys are being put in the position because they need to be. And because there are people that have faith that they're going to execute well. And I can be okay with that. In terms of like how the rest of like a lot of the coaching changes in the NFL occurred at the end of the season, the Jags were a little bit slow on the ball in terms of getting people. That's kind of another concern, that it's like, well, if I'm not very familiar with this guy, and
he was one of the last guys left.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to take the ugly girl to the prom, but it's like, to some degree, it's like he was still, in a really good system on an NFL, roster. It's not like the guy was just sitting on his hands waiting for his next big jump, and he he finally got it.
Games of Madden all day.
yeah, dude. I mean, shit. That's like, exactly with like, I mean, I hate keep going back to Doug Peterson, but it's like, when you're hiring guys that like previously like legit just didn't have a job or whatever, it's like, you're going and getting guys who are consistently competitive year in and year out in football, and that's something that will translate. You just hope that it translates well.
Definitely. Anything else you want to say about Grant Udinski?
Nah, man. I think we just keep it rolling.
Yeah, so then I guess the next logical step would be to talk about our new defensive coordinator, Anthony Campanile, coming over from the Packers organization. This is another one where it's like, I'm not going to pretend like I knew anything about this guy prior to the hiring. What stands out to me so far from the offseason is that the players seem to really love this guy. You see in the interviews, he gets a lot of seemingly really authentic, praise from kind of the leaders of the defense. It feels like it can't get a whole lot worse than last year, so it's like the bar is pretty low.
God, dude, we are so jaded. It's like, really, it's just like, well, it literally couldn't be worse than Ryan Nielsen. It's
basically not, right? I mean, because it's like, and that's the crazy thing is, do you remember how much hype Ryan Nielsen had coming in to be the new defensive coordinator? Dude, everybody was like, oh, this is one of the sharpest hires in the NFL. Like, he's coming over from the Falcons. Like, they way overachieved over there. Like, this is... I mean, they made it sound like this guy was going to be, getting head coaching offers after 1 year in Jacksonville. Oh, my goodness. It just couldn't have been... I mean, it was a disaster start to finish.
It was. He just was in the wrong sport. Honestly, if he was running a hockey team where he's subbing in guys in and out every other down, this would be... He would be a god. But it's like, unfortunately, the Jags were bottom of the league. Like, they couldn't get off the field. I don't want to have it be a dogfight between 31st in the NFL or 32nd, but we were consistently battling up and down in terms of who else wants to be the worst defense in the NFL last year.
And against the run and the pass, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You could get it however you wanted against the Jags last year.
And so, I mean, I guess succinctly put, you can't do worse. That's right. Yeah, if you're 32nd, it's literally speaking at that point.
And that was also the puzzling thing is you look at the changes that got made between the 23 season and the 24 season. Like the collapse down the stretch of 23, heading into 24. And it's like they decided to fire Mike Caldwell. They decided to fire the defensive coordinator, not the offensive coordinator. I mean, and then it's just a huge step back. The one good thing for Anthony Campanile, I think he's inheriting a defense with some solid pieces. You know what I mean? There's talent to work with. There are definitely holes in that roster, but you're not taking a zero. You know what I mean? So we'll see what he can cook up. I'm hearing that all the defensive guys are shedding off all that weight that Ryan Nielsen instructed them to put on. So I don't know. Maybe they'll be at a better weight. Maybe that was the whole issue. There's nobody who was at a good playing weight. Tough to say.
Not playing weight, being put in really weird positions where you're not like actually in the ideal Eric Armstead is the perfect example.
Absolutely.
That it's just like the guy, he may have been at a time like one of the elite defensive tackles. There is no world where that guy should ever be playing edge ever. I mean, he just was. I mean, even
Well,
when we went and watched the Texans game, it was like watching in slow motion this guy getting down into a 3-point stance, and it's like
yeah,
they've hiked the ball and already ran half the play, and now he's getting up from his
yeah,
stance, and it's just like it's mismanagement. I think that he's a bad player, Eric Armstead? No, I think that he still has quite a bit to contribute, and I think that anybody could be bullish about what the Jags defensive line can do. Sure, the
definitely.
interior still might be a little bit of the softer part of that defensive front, but it's it's still a thing where if you have like people calling the plays that end up putting your players in better positions, you're already, way further into the race than if you were just getting out of the starting blocks because you're just
Definitely.
not in the right place, right time.
Yeah, that was the frustrating thing about the defensive line last year is it felt like it was so rare to have Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, and Eric Armstead all on the field at the same time. You know, it always felt like one or two of those guys would be on the sideline. It just never felt like the rotations that you mentioned earlier that Ryan Nielsen was kind of his calling card. It felt like we never were having our most talented guys, all rushing the passer at the same time. So that was, it felt like such a whiff. There was so much excitement about Eric Armstead coming in
Oh
last
yeah.
year, and like you said, I've not given up on the guy. I think, I listened to some interviews that he did, and I think there were some. I think that the coaching staff brought him in initially to take a lot of snaps at the edge, and then it clearly was not working, and the coaching staff. I mean, from the interviews, it sounds like the coaching staff did not want to adapt. But it sounds like this year, he's going to be playing inside primarily. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I still have faith that he can be a really big, important contributor on that defensive line.
Yeah. I mean, getting
We'll
them
just
all on the field at the same time. I mean
step one, step
that
zero, right?
yeah, I mean, like literally, if you ask like a 5-year-old, like, hey, or like a 5-year-old to play a Madden game, it's like, hey, who do you want as your starting five? And you could just look at numbers and you'd be like, oh, okay, I want
I
my
just
best
want the
people to
best
start.
guys. Give
Yeah,
me the
I'm
best
convinced
guys.
that
Yeah.
Ryan Nielsen was ordering like 5 pizzas before the game, and he's like, "Hey, these pizzas aren't going to finish themselves." They're just subbing in and out, taking turns, trying to decimate the pizza.
Come
It
get a slice,
just
man.
to
Yeah.
just to get rid of. He's like, "Hey, man, I'm going to throw it all away if you guys don't eat it."
Can't have
it
that
was
on your conscience.
no, and it was like just mind-boggling. These guys, I don't know. You don't have to be that knowledgeable to just be like, hey, we want our best unit out there at any given time.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Anthony Campanile. Like we mentioned, can't get much worse. The formula seems like it can be a little bit simple. The pieces are there, fingers crossed. Anything else you want to cover on the front office changes before we head into free agency?
No, I think that that's like a perfect point because again, a lot of the things that we're commending, like the guys at the top four, are a lot of what they did in the off season, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of like the progression that they're making in terms of transitioning away from a team that was built by a different GM, and there's some guys that maybe you feel like maybe got an unfair shake just from the previous coaching regime.
Absolutely.
But I think that there's a lot of guys that also it's just like, yeah, these guys are not who we should be starting. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that you can really lead into a lot of what he's gotten started. James Gladstone.
Definitely. Yeah, so that being said, let's we can start off by going over the kind of notable free agent losses of the season. Um, So in my notes here, I've got, we lost Brandon Sheriff, who had a relatively unceremonious stint in Jacksonville. He was fine at pass pro. He wasn't like the all pro player that he was in Washington.
Sure.
Whenever we signed him, I thought he had a decent, a decent service here. I'm not like necessarily like double over in pain seeing him walk out the door. He's getting older. We need to kind of start getting the offensive line moving there. And then on the same topic of the offensive line, our center Mitch Morse retired after one season with the Jags. Decided that was enough.
Yeah,
to hang it up.
One season will drive him in to do a lot of crazy things.
That's right. Let's see, cornerback Ronald Darby. He is, he was asked to step into a very big role for that defense last year. I feel like the unfortunate thing for Ronald Darby is that he was not necessarily supposed to be like the guy in the secondary holding it down, covering, the other team's best receiver, but he sort of had to with how Tyson Campbell's season developed last year. I don't know that was really ever going to be his strength. You got to bake in some, Ryan Nielsen fact. Like the whole defense took such a big step back last year. You've got to bake in some of that had to be due to the Ryan Nielsen effect. I'm wishing him well moving forward, but that's not a guy that you're sad to see heading out the door based on how last year went.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Also on the topic of the defensive secondary last year, safety Andre Sisco heading out the door. And this one I think is a little interesting because there was a time when it looked like Andre Sisco was poised to take a big step and maybe be one of the premier safeties in the NFL. I guess it would have been that.
It was right around the time whenever Tyson got his extension, because I remember feeling it's like, hey, you were maybe a little bit surprised that maybe they both weren't getting that extension. They came into the Jags organization at the exact same time, and they both had a pretty good rookie year, and then they built off of that, and they both seemed to be trending up pretty well, especially in kind of a rare sense that often a lot of Jags picks aren't where they're maybe historically not as well as developing them. So to see two guys at really two positions that are always very key in a defense, and that often pose to be a pretty weak spot for the Jags themselves, to see them both elevating, you were really hopeful for Andre Sisco there for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it was a pretty sharp regression that I think that just a lot of guys on defense kind of unfortunately experienced.
No doubt. And this is where I have to think that the Nielsen effect really didn't give Andre Sisco a fair shake. I mean, you just saw the flashes of talent earlier in his career. I personally was kind of sad to see him go because I thought I wasn't ready to give up on him. You know what I mean? And especially in the context of how the rest of the offseason developed and for where he ended up and for what he ended up there for, we really couldn't have kept Andre Sisco around. Our safety group, it's looking rough. I mean, we'll get to some of the free agents that we brought in and some of the draft picks, but it definitely still looks like one of the biggest holes in the roster, and it makes me like that's the one player that walked out the door that I was like, man, are you sure we couldn't have made that work somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that, again, without really getting into the ins and outs of the economics of it all, I mean, when you look at a lot of the losses that we experienced, they were a lot of the guys that we had to pay that Jax tax for to get him into
Definitely.
Jacksonville. You know, a lot of
Yep.
guys that kind of we immediately overpaid on just to get them in the door to come and be a part of the scheme. And maybe Andre Sisco just that was never in the cards that he would take some sort of discount to come back to the Jags. I don't know what kind of money that he's making now with the Jets, but he is a guy that it's like I do wish him the best because
That is a great question.
I mean I don't know
His contract.
yeah it's not one that I would imagine that he's done. I mean truth be told
Looks
if
1 year. Okay, he actually got more than I would have expected. He got 1 year, $8.5 million. But that's not. I mean, that's something I felt like the Jags could have made work if they really wanted to.
yeah, and so that's where it's like I think it's clear that they didn't want to. I just don't think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
they wanted to.
That and that's what I'm getting at. It's like it's clear that they didn't want him. Who knows? We'll see how it pans out. It is disappointing to see how our safety room is kind of developed. But one last shout out to Andre Sisco. My favorite thing about him as a player is how every time the Jags played the Chiefs, he seemed to just absolutely clock the hell out of somebody.
Yeah.
And that's something that I will always respect about Andre Sisco.
He was a cool guy.
The other two big free agency losses, maybe the most notable two, would be some of our pass catchers in Evan Ingram heading over to Denver, and Christian Kirk heading over to division rival Houston Texans. So I wanted to kind of talk about these two guys at the same time, sort of, because they were like the prototypes of what you just were talking about a moment ago. Whenever we were heading into the 2022 season, and it was clear that we needed some weapons on the roster, and we were gonna have to pay a premium to get them into Jacksonville.
Yep.
These were kind of the two big names that a lot of people were potentially correctly saying that the Jags overpaid for. So the first guy I want to talk about is Evan Ingram, and I have a lot of feelings about Evan Ingram as a player and his move away from the Jags.
I would say that it was pretty like when it was very much sure that he was leaving away from the Jags. I would say that a majority of the fan base was really not that happy with that move. That a lot of people thought that Evan Ingram was very serviceable. And I will definitely admit that he made quite a bit of memorable plays. I mean, I remember the play where he catches the pass and drug the guy out. I can't remember if it was like the Titans game, just so that they could continue marching down the field.
No, that was against Dallas. That was that game
yes.
against the Cowboys. That
even
if
more
we
electric.
got it to overtime, and then Rayshon Jenkins made the pick six off of Dak Prescott. Yeah.
Yes.
That was the play. That was the play that got us there. Yeah, you're right. Well, and that's what I wanted to say. I want to lead with respect when it comes to Evan Ingram. When I think of Evan Ingram, I think of an incredibly hard worker. I think of a guy that was a leader in the room. The plays that come to mind, he's got some of the most iconic plays the Jags had over the last several years. Whether that's the play that you just mentioned against the Cowboys. I think about the touchdown he hauled in the playoff game against the Chargers that got us some points on the board, stopped the bleeding. I think about the Texans game that we went to last year where Trevor Lawrence got his head blown off, and the first guy that was up to stick up for him was Evan Ingram. Yep. He had Trevor's back, and I respect him a lot for that, and I'm very thankful for his tenure in Jacksonville. With that being said, I am not a believer in Evan Ingram's skill set, and I think that his time in Jacksonville, he was utilized as like the training wheels of the offense. He's a big target, fast enough to get a little bit of space down low, but it never felt to me like he was like a true difference maker, I guess. It felt like when the chips were on the table, Evan Ingram was not going to, be that consistent first down guy, moving the chains, making the big play. To me, a lot of his production felt like it was a product of volume,
Yep.
he got a ton of targets, and I don't know that was what was best for the offense. Aside from that, his blocking ability has always seemed like one of the biggest issues in his game to me. Doesn't give you a whole lot in the blocking department. And I think that comes back to like one of the key issues that was so glaring for the Jags last year was you look at like obvious passing situations, and I can see it so vividly in my mind, all these plays where the offensive line is actually holding up okay, but there's a free rusher that just gets totally by Evan Ingram or Travis Etienne. Because those two guys, that's part of the tight end and the running back role. Like, you have to be able to pass protect. And it just felt to me like when those guys were on the field at the same time, it was so exploitable for defenses. You know what I mean? They just seek out one of those matchups. Any type of blitz. Like there was just never like a reliable blitz pickup, I felt like. So I've really gotten into it a lot with a lot of folks on the Jaguars subreddit about this, but I am sticking to my guns. I think that Brenton Strange is going to be a great replacement to walk into that tight end one role. Evan Ingram, thank you for your service. Best of luck to you. Not sad to see you go.
I think it will either be proved very right or very wrong, your take, when the Denver Broncos will be an exciting offense to watch, I would say.
Dude, we're going to get to see the Evan Ingram revenge game this year.
Dude. Bro's going to go and catch 5 balls for 14 yards. He's going to be an absolute monster. I think that we will really see it in retrospect very clearly. And I think that he will show that he's just kind of another part of the rotating cast and crew.
Yeah, and I think I ended my my spiel on Evan Ingram on a somewhat negative note. I don't think that Evan Ingram is like a bad player. I just think he's closer to like a replacement level guy than his catches per season would have you believe.
I think that especially with like the way that the offense has situated itself now, like I think that they're going to find a lot of value and strength in a tight end that, they need to go out and catch a couple balls throughout the game. But really that it's like, hey, shoring up that line, shoring up that pass protection, elevating Trevor Lawrence. I think it's again, I think it's all a mentality of what the organization wants to do now. And I think that a lot of it is very Trevor-centric. They're not wanting some guy who is going to just be I don't want to say check down merchant, but I mean, it is a guy that just like will get a lot of volume, but that perhaps doesn't really stabilize the game for Trevor or elevate it, monstrously in the passing game. And I think that, with Christian Kirk's departure, that was a guy that Trevor Lawrence, which again, Christian Kirk leaving over for the Texans, that was a guy that was like almost a security blanket of sorts for Trevor for many seasons, especially when I saw something the other day that was of the, nearly 30 receivers that Trevor Lawrence has played with throughout his career, somewhere around just like a third of them are still on active rosters. I mean, he just had such a bad core.
It's not like he's been in the league a long time either,
No. I mean, again, we're talking about multiple head coaches, many different coordinators coming in and out the building. That receiving core is another one that has drastically changed even from day one to now. Mm-hmm. And Christian Kirk is, again, that guy was exactly what Trevor needed, is somebody dependable. When he first got in to the Jags organization, they needed somebody. They paid the Jags tax for him, but he was dependable. And so seeing that departure, I don't think that anybody would say it doesn't make sense. But I know that there's somebody else out there that has a little bit of something else to be saying about Christian Kirk.
That's right. We do have another piece of fan mail here. Let's see what this one says. It says, Texans fan here. You guys couldn't have utilized Christian Kirk any worse in Jacksonville. Wow. Now that he's here in Houston, he hasn't dropped a single pass. That is tough to believe. Let's see. He says, C.J. Stroud clearly has a better touch on the ball than Trevor Lawrence. Inside sources are saying it's because he has incredibly soft hands. Any idea what his moisturizing routine might be? And then it's signed, Enjoying the Victory Lap, Anthony Bingus. That's a good question, Anthony. There's a lot of people in the media lately that have been doing this whole C.J. Stroud versus Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud's clearly the best quarterback in the division, yada, 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 whatever. And I think a lot of that conversation is pretty unfair. I don't think it's really contextualizing the situations for both teams. But one thing that you cannot, and this never gets brought up, you cannot even debate in Trevor's favor, is that C.J. Stroud 100% has softer hands than Trevor Lawrence. Anthony, you're totally right. I don't know what his secret is. I mean, he's the class of the NFL, some are saying, in terms of keeping those things nice and soft. I mean, if I had to take a guess, maybe Vaseline, cocoa butter, perhaps, any thoughts there, Garrett?
There's a lot in the running. And honestly, it's really unfortunate that a lot of the O-line that the Jags go and turn through end up going over to Houston. Because if it were the other way around, we would get to know what it feels like for a celebratory slap on the tush. Is it two pillows being lightly thrown together? Something that it just couldn't be fathomed unless you felt it firsthand.
And I think somebody went on the record saying it felt like the kiss of an angel.
That's not surprising at all, Evan. And honestly, I don't think that this gets enough attention is the problem.
It gets a lot of insiders. The mainstream media will not talk about this.
That's what I hate it. So that when the combine when it was first going on, again, it was a much more limited pool of candidates back in the day, but they originally used to do a soft handshake competition to really get a good feel for who had that touch, that absolute soft bomb of a handshake. And because they don't do that anymore, you just can't even get a good feel for it. That's why I loved Drew Lock out of Mizzou, because I knew those soft hands had to be making it up.
You can see it on TV, dude. You can see it on TV. You can just tell.
When you got small hands like that, you have to be making it up in the skin department. And I'm not saying that CJ has got any hand size problems, but he definitely has some strengths when it comes to the moisturizer. I don't know what it is. So, Anthony, you've left me nearly speechless. It's one you can't really argue with. Good for Christian Kirk though. Happy for him. No balls dropped. That one might be a little bit out there, but again, it's when you get fan mail like this, there are often uneducated things that are said. You are half right and you're half wrong on this one, and I think that we can pretty well agree with you on the hand thing.
Just to wrap it up on Christian Kirk, I mean, he's been a really big part of this offense for the last several years. He's just the thing I think that was the toughest for me about Christian Kirk is he felt like one of those guys that's just prone to injury. The way that the last several seasons have played out. Um, I think it's a guy who never really got the respect he deserved for what he was doing in Jacksonville. Um,
Yeah,
once again, I can't say that he's like this irreplaceable talent. You know
it
what I
made
mean?
sense. He had to go. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
just again that was kind of turning the page on an old book, and I think that everyone's excited to see what who's coming in the door will do, which I think like really kind of translates it pretty well past that. Although I would say that there is one guy, that's a little bit passed over is a pretty monumental loss, and that'd be Mr. Mac Jones himself.
Oh my goodness, true. Yeah. Just quickly on Mac Jones, he was a pretty quality backup quarterback. For as frustrating as it was to watch him for so much of the season last year, he probably was a pretty big step up from what we've got now with Chris Mullins, potentially Seth Hennigan. But backup quarterback to me is like we're not in. We don't have the type of roster where if Trevor Lawrence goes down, we should be hoping to salvage the season somehow.
True.
If Trevor Lawrence goes down, the season's over, and it doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to say you don't want to put your best guys out there and try to win the game, but it's clear that this team is not making any kind of playoff run without their starting quarterback. So, good for Mac. Hope he gets some opportunities out there and see. Maybe we'll see it. Maybe we'll get the Mac Jones revenge game
Dude,
against Jacksonville.
that's actually what they drew up the script, was just to get as many revenge games as possible in a given stretch.
Could Mac Jones be a Jaguar sleeper agent in the San Francisco organization? Sending over the playbook? Feeding us some
It could
info?
be. I think that Mac Jones, I mean, he's a Jacksonville guy too. I
He's
mean,
from Jacksonville, yeah.
he's Jacksonville through and through.
That's right. Duval till he dies, man. I mean, hey.
We will be able to be there in person and tell firsthand whether they're following the playbook that Mac Jones sent.
Yep. All right. So, any closing thoughts here on any of the front office changes or any of the free agent losses, the attrition that we've seen walk out the building this year?
No, I think that it's healthy change is what it all is. I mean, there's some guys that maybe you shed crocodile tears to see them ushered out the door.
Yeah.
Some guys that you really are, hey, you're gonna miss the personality, you're gonna miss the hard work, the leadership when they exit the building. But at the end of the day, it's about building a winning program, and the Jags just didn't have one. And that was the biggest thing, is the leadership with Shad Khan and employing Tony Baselli. They knew that a big change had to be made. Mm-hmm. And I love the direction that they've given. I think it really allows a lot of the stale air to be ushered out the door. And so optimistic is the way that I'm feeling. Sitting here 2 weeks out from kickoff, is that I feel like there's promise. And I just hope that the Jags, they set the tone week one, that this is all moving in a positive direction, that we see the Trevor Lawrence that we want to see. And I think that the front office has done a good job, and I think that covering into the personnel changes as a result of the draft and the free agent additions moving forward, I think that there's a lot of like really positive things to be looking forward to.
Absolutely, we will, and we will discuss some of those additions that we've made in free agency and through the draft next time. One final note to hit on. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The fresh air in the front office this year, it's just like you can't understate how much it means for this organization to finally get rid of Trent Baalke.
Yep.
Like, just, especially when we started the offseason and it looked like somehow, some way, like a cockroach in a nuclear fallout situation, he was going to survive and he was still going to be around and he was still going to be pulling all the strings, behind the scenes. You can't be much happier. I think you couldn't have expected any more out of the front office changes that took place. And I think it really inspires, a lot of hope that this organization is going to be moving in the right direction. So anyway, any further closing thoughts on your end, Garrett?
No, I think that perhaps it's a little fitting that we maybe rip a little Duval and then let it go at that.
All right. Hey, I think it only fits, right? All right, count us down.
But before we do, we doing a Liam Cohen Duval? Or are we doing a big Duval for the boys and girls out there?
I think we saved the Liam Cohen Duval for a special occasion.
That's
break in case of emergency.
A wedding, a funeral, 25-year wedding anniversary. I think that there's
whatever calls for it, really.
A potential Super Bowl berth. Bit too optimistic.
You never know. Just float those thoughts out there into the universe.
All righty. 3, 2, 1. Duval!
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on our inaugural episode of Jags Cast. Catch us next time where we will discuss some of our free agent additions as well as the draft class that we brought in this year. Peace.